Welcome to the Daily Brain Podcast. Get ready to clear up all the confusion about today's word. Cathartic.
Cathartic.
You might have heard this word used to describe like a good cry after a movie or a tough workout.
Yeah.
Or even like a heated argument.
Right.
But like, what does it really mean? Today we're going to unpack the psychology behind catharsis.
Yeah.
Exploring like its origins, its benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And some surprising examples of how it shows up in like everyday life. We've got a stack of interesting sources for you.
Oh, cool.
From, classic psychology texts to a fascinating article in Psychology Today about something called a depression party.
A depression party. Now, that sounds intriguing. I think we should definitely get to that later on.
Yeah.
But first, you're right. Let's start by understanding what we even mean when we say catharsis. The word itself has a journey.
Okay.
Almost as interesting as the concept.
I love it when a word has a story behind it.
Oh, yeah.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so catharsis comes from the Greek word catharsis, meaning purification or cleansing.
Okay.
It started as a medical term referring to a physical process of flushing something out of the body.
Okay, so initially it wasn't about emotions at all.
Exactly. But over time, that idea of cleansing or purging, it evolved to describe an emotional release.
Gotcha.
That's the catharsis we're talking about today, the process of reducing or eliminating a mental complex
Okay.
by bringing it to conscious awareness and allowing it to be expressed.
So it's about getting those feelings OUT, not just bottling them up.
Yes, but it's not simply venting anger or like having a meltdown. It's
Yeah.
more nuanced than that.
Right.
Healthy catharsis involves fully experiencing and processing the emotions, not just exploding and then moving on.
That makes a lot of sense. I can see how simply exploding could actually make things worse in the long run.
Right.
So how does this idea of emotional release connect to psychology?
Well, think back to the early days of psychoanalysis.
Yeah.
With Joseph Breuer and Sigmund Freud.
Breuer, Freud's colleague, developed a cathartic treatment for hysteria, where he had patients recall traumatic experiences under hypnosis.
Wow.
This allowed them to kind of express the repressed emotions they'd been holding on to.
It's like uncorking those bottled up emotions, right?
Exactly.
But how did Freud's theories fit in?
Freud's psychoanalytic theory emphasized the unconscious mind's role in shaping our behavior. He believed that by bringing those unconscious feelings to light, people could experience relief and make positive changes.
Interesting.
Catharsis became a way to access and process those hidden emotions.
So it's not just about feeling better in the moment. It's about understanding those deep-seated emotional patterns.
Exactly. Now, this idea of bringing emotions to the surface might sound intense,
Yeah.
and it can be, but there's actually a fascinating physiological side to catharsis as well.
Oh, I love the science part. Tell me more.
Well, studies have shown that when you release emotions, your body releases like those feel-good chemicals, like oxytocin and endorphin.
Oh, yeah. These chemicals can ease both physical and emotional pain. Think about that sense of relief you feel after a good cry.
I know that feeling well. It's like a weight lifted off your shoulders.
Right. And there's even more to it.
Okay.
Did you know that emotional tears, unlike those from cutting onions, have a different chemical composition?
Really? I had no idea.
They actually contain stress hormones and toxins.
Wow.
So crying isn't just an emotional response. It's also a way of physically flushing those stress chemicals from your system.
Wow. So crying might be even more beneficial than we realize.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. Catharsis doesn't just happen in therapy sessions.
Oh, okay.
It happens in our everyday lives in all sorts of ways.
So we're not talking about lying on a couch and spilling our deepest secrets.
Right.
What are some other examples of catharsis in action?
Well, just think about talking to a close friend about something that's been bothering you. That can be incredibly cathartic.
Oh, for sure. Sometimes just getting something off your chest is all it takes.
Right. And there are so many other possibilities. Think about listening to music that truly resonates with your emotions, or expressing yourself through art, whether it's painting, writing, or playing music. Physical activity is another great example.
I've always found that a good workout can really help clear my head.
Absolutely. Physical exertion can be a fantastic way to release pent-up energy and emotion. And remember that Psychology Today article you mentioned about a depression party.
Yeah, that one was a bit of a surprise.
This improv teacher, Nina Wise, actually encourages people to embrace and even play with their darker emotions.
Interesting.
In her depression party, guests wore lit black candles and even ate black food.
Wow, that's a very different approach.
It's like turning negativity on its head and finding a way to kind of laugh about it. They even ended the party with like upbeat music and dancing.
Wow.
Which sounds surprisingly cathartic.
I can see how that could be a powerful experience.
Yeah.
It's like giving yourself permission to feel those difficult emotions fully, but in a safe and even humorous environment.
Exactly. Finding healthy and creative ways to process and release those emotions is key.
So we're seeing that catharsis can take so many forms. It's not just about those like dramatic breakthroughs we see in movies. It could be found in like everyday moments and experiences.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that catharsis is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time fix.
Right.
But rather a journey of self-discovery and emotional growth.
So it's about finding what works for you and integrating those practices into your life.
Precisely. But it's also important to acknowledge that while catharsis can be beneficial, it's not without its potential downsides.
Oh, I was just about to ask about that. What are some things we should be aware of?
Well, there's some debate in the psychology world about whether certain types of catharsis are truly helpful in the long run.
Okay.
For example, some experts believe that while venting anger might provide temporary relief, it could actually reinforce negative behaviors.
So while punching a pillow might feel good in the moment, it might not actually be addressing the root of the problem.
Exactly. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound without actually cleaning it. And then there's crying.
Wait, you're saying crying can be a bad thing?
Not always, of course. Crying is generally a healthy and natural emotional release.
Okay.
But if you find yourself crying excessively, uncontrollably, or for no apparent reason, it could be a sign of a deeper issue that might need professional attention.
That makes sense. So it's about recognizing when those emotional responses might be signaling something more serious.
Exactly. It's about paying attention to our emotional landscape and seeking help when we need it.
Which brings us back to the importance of self-awareness and self-care.
Absolutely. Understanding our own emotional patterns and finding healthy ways to process those emotions is crucial for our overall well-being.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into catharsis, what's the main message you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the key takeaway is that catharsis is a powerful tool for emotional healing and growth. But like any tool, it needs to be used wisely and with care. We need to understand its nuances, its potential benefits, and its possible downsides.
It's not just about letting it all out. It's about understanding and processing those emotions in a healthy way.
Precisely. Catharsis isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, but rather a journey of self-discovery and exploration.
And hopefully this deep dive is giving our listeners some valuable insights and aha moments to help them on that journey.
I think it is. We've covered a lot of ground already, from the ancient Greek origins of the word to the latest research on emotional release.
Yeah, we've explored different examples of catharsis in action, from talking with a friend to attending a depression party. And we've discussed the importance of approaching catharsis thoughtfully, recognizing its limitations, and seeking professional help when needed.
Right.
But there's so much more to unpack.
There is. Yeah. You know, one thing that really struck me from our sources is how much our culture shapes our understanding of catharsis.
You're right. We were just touching on that before the break. It's almost like there's this unspoken rule book about how we're supposed to deal with our emotions.
Exactly. And those rules vary wildly depending on where you are in the world, even within different communities or families.
Right.
In some cultures, expressing emotions openly is encouraged, while in others, it's seen as a sign of weakness. Think about how differently men and women are often raised when it comes to emotional expression.
Oh, absolutely. Growing up, I remember hearing boys told to man up and hide their feelings, while girls were sometimes stereotyped as being overly emotional.
It's those kinds of societal expectations that can really impact how people approach emotional release and whether they seek it out or suppress it. If men are constantly told to bottle up their emotions, it can lead to all sorts of problems down the road.
It's like denying them a fundamental part of being human. And it's not just about men either. Women can also face pressure to suppress certain emotions like anger, which can be just as harmful.
Right, so it's about recognizing those societal pressures and challenging them when they're not serving us. It's about giving ourselves permission to feel the full range of human emotions without judgment or shame.
And finding healthy ways to express those emotions regardless of what society might dictate. But how do we know when an outlet for those emotions is healthy? We touched on the idea of venting anger earlier. What are your thoughts on rage rooms, those places where people can pay to smash things up.
That's an interesting one. While it might feel good in the moment to let loose, like that some experts believe it could actually make you more prone to angry outbursts in the future, it's like training your brain to respond to anger with aggression rather than finding healthier coping mechanisms.
So it could be cathartic in the short term, but maybe not the most effective long-term strategy.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to approach catharsis thoughtfully. Just like we need to be mindful of how societal pressures can influence us, we also need to be aware of the potential downsides of certain forms of catharsis and make sure they align with our goals for emotional well-being.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So as we wrap up our deep dive into catharsis, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the most important point is that catharsis is a natural and often beneficial process of emotional release. It can help us process difficult experiences, reduce stress, and even improve our physical health.
And we've seen that it can take many forms. We talked about things like talking with friends, engaging in creative pursuits, physical activity, and even that unique concept of a depression party.
Right. It's about finding what works for you and incorporating those practices into your life in a way that feels authentic and supportive.
But we also need to remember to approach catharsis thoughtfully and with self-awareness. Being mindful of those potential downsides, like reinforcing negative behaviors or avoiding underlying issues, is crucial.
You've got it. And lastly, I think it's vital to challenge those societal expectations around emotions. Give yourself permission to feel your feelings and then find healthy ways to express them, even if it goes against the grain of what you were taught growing up.
That's great advice. And now for our listeners, here's something for you to ponder as you go about your day. What activities or experiences have you found to be cathartic? What are those things that help you process and release emotions in a healthy way?
It's a great question to reflect on. Once you've identified those things, think about how you can incorporate them into your life more intentionally. Because remember, catharsis isn't just a concept from psychology textbooks. It's a real and powerful human experience that can help us navigate the ups and downs of life.
And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dives into catharsis. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and aha moments along the way.
Keep exploring those aha moments, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
You know, as we're talking about finding those personal outlets for catharsis, I'm remembering that scene in Good Will Hunting.
Oh, yeah.
Where Robin Williams' character
Yeah.
helps Matt Damon's character have this, emotional breakthrough.
Right.
It's a powerful cinematic example of catharsis in action.
It really is. That scene highlights how catharsis isn't always about, grand gestures or explosive releases. Sometimes it's about those quieter moments of connection and vulnerability that allow us to kind of process our emotions and move forward.
Exactly. It can be as simple as a heartfelt conversation with a trusted friend, or finally allowing yourself to cry after holding back for so long.
And those seemingly small moments can have a ripple effect, leading to greater self-awareness and a deeper understanding of our own emotional landscape. But remember, catharsis isn't a magic bullet. It's not going to solve all our problems overnight.
Right. It's more like a tool we can use to navigate the complexities of our emotional lives. And just like any tool, it takes practice and intention to use it effectively.
I like that analogy. And part of that practice involves recognizing that catharsis is a process, not a destination. It's about developing a deeper connection with ourselves and finding healthy ways to sort of manage those inevitable ups and downs that life throws our way.
So it's about building that emotional toolkit we were talking about earlier, equipping ourselves with those strategies and practices that help us navigate the emotional terrain.
Precisely. And one of the most valuable tools in that kit is self-awareness. It's about paying attention to our own emotional patterns, recognizing what triggers us, and understanding how we tend to respond in those challenging moments.
Because once we have that awareness, we can start to make conscious choices about how we want to respond.
Right.
Rather than simply reacting on autopilot. We can choose to engage in activities that we've found to be cathartic and supportive.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's about taking ownership of our emotional well-being and actively seeking those experiences and practices that allow us to process our emotions in a healthy and constructive way.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
We've explored the meaning of catharsis, its origins, its benefits, and even those potential downsides to watch out for. We've seen that it can take many forms and that it's deeply influenced by our culture and personal experiences. And we've learned that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but rather a journey of self-discovery and emotional growth.
It is.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into catharsis, we want to leave you with this final thought. What does catharsis look like for you? What are those activities or experiences that help you feel a sense of release and renewal?
Remember, catharsis isn't just a fancy word from psychology textbooks. It's a real and powerful human experience that we can all tap into.
So keep exploring those aha moments, keep those emotional toolkits handy, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.